Now this will be a quite interesting episode actually. Now when we go through some difficulties in the New Testament, and we are starting with the Gospel of Matthew. So if you have been really detailed in your reading, you might have seen that Matthew 2, and where it's a quotation from Micah 5:2, they are not really the same. You know, some people, they just read through Matthew and it says this happened in order to fulfill what was written through the prophet, and da. And then some people just read it, go through. Some people also, they read it and then they go back and they look at the source text from which Matthew is quoting, and they are thinking, well, what happens here? What is Matthew doing? So now there is a little bit differences between the Matthew text, Matthew 2.6, and the source text in Micah 2. So is there a distortion that alters the meanings, or what really happens? I'm going to explain this. I'm going to go through in detail. You know, I am textual studies. I have done some my own theological studies in the New Testament textual criticism, and then we're working with the Greek text, the manuscripts. And so there's also, you know, the Hebrew manuscripts, the New Testament Greek manuscripts, but then there's a lot of Greek Old Testament manuscripts. We have the Septuagint, various different Septuagint manuscripts. We have also some other Greek versions and so on. So I will explain a little bit about this, and just to help us understand what Matthew is doing, and then in the end, don't miss the end, because there I have a quite intriguing modern example how we can think of this. Okay, so let's dive into the intriguing connection. Matthew 2:6 and Micah 5:2. It becomes clear if we examine the Greek and the Hebrew that there's several variations actually in the wording between Matthew's text and the Hebrew text in Micah 5:2. So there's rather unusual deviations, and also Matthew puts a negative, like the Hebrew has da, so Matthew has don't da, like a negative in front of it. So least or not the least, if you understand. So it's important to note that Matthew, he did not draw from the Septuagint version, from the Greek the Greek Old Testament, because sometimes when there's difference between Matthew and the Hebrew, we see that the Greek Old Testament was just closer to Matthew, so we cannot use this. But in this example, the Greek Old Testament and the Hebrew are close, and Matthew is doing something completely different. So some might speculate that he's using another Greek translation, possibly Proto-Theodotion, but I will not go in depth into this because it's way too complicated and it would get us off track. But while the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, aligns closer with the Masoretic text, the Hebrew, Matthew opted for a more paraphrastic version. He seems to inject some interpretative elements, as he was working directly with the Hebrew original and kind of altering it a little bit to emphasize different implications, rather than just providing a strict literal rendering, if you understand. So he has the Hebrew text, and he makes some alterations to make something new theology with it. Just, if you are not completely with me at this moment, just bear with me, and as I continue, you will just understand more and more. So I will go through some of the changes now. One significant change that occurred in the first clause concerning Bethlehem, the house of Ephrathah, is Matthew, he changes Ephrathah with the phrase land of Judah. Now, this alteration hints a poetic name of Judah as the Fruitful One, deriving from the P-R-Y in the Hebrew, signifying fruitfulness. So this is one change he makes. Now, in the second clause, addressing Bethlehem's size among the thousands of Judah, there is where Matthew introduces a strong negative element. So it says, not this. as the Hebrew just has this. While Micah and the Septuagint presents a positive assertion about the Bethlehem size, Matthew opts for a paraphrase. Now, he does this to highlight the implications that despite its modest and quite simple population, Bethlehem holds immense theological importance for being the birthplace of the Messiah. Another alteration occurred in the treatments of the word alapim, meaning thousands. In Matthew 2:6, the word renders as ruler, also for Matthew's theological purposes. This change makes sense in the context of addressing a town rather than a military unit. Now, towns may have been referred to as thousands because they housed a significant number of families that could minister as men at arms when the nation were going to war. But there's also a possibility that Matthew, or the Greek version that Matthew was referring to, read alupim instead of alepe in the Hebrew. So this subtle, small, but still difference in spelling might have led to the interpretation of ruler. Considering the messianic theme that Matthew wants to highlight and the divine destiny of this messianic ruler, we can understand how Matthew's interpretation finds support in the context. Now, this has been a lot of information. Just bear with me. Soon I will give you the kind of the modern example, how we can think of it and just grasp it with in our world. So. However, I also want to say to you that I have done some of my own studies using this kind of fulfillment citations that Matthew is working with. And so if you want, you can just Google scribal harmonization in Matthew's fulfillment citations. So I have an article in the journal Novum Testamentum together with Professor Tommy Wasserman, and the full name of the article is Scribal Harmonizations in Matthew's Fulfillment Citations in Codices Alexandrinus, Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. But you can just Google Scribal Harmonizations in Matthew's Fulfillment Citation and you will get it. However, let's continue. So, notably, the latter part of Matthew 2:6, who will shepherd my people Israel, also diverges from Micah 5:2. This phrase is borrowed from 2 Samuel 5:2, where the Lord is promising something to King David. This confluence of passages, when he's just Matthew is taking from different passages and it brings him together from two distinct, from 2 Samuel and from Micah, it kind of emphasizes the fulfillment of divine prophecy concerning the birthplace of Messiah, and also not only the birthplace but his royal lineage to King David. So, lastly, in the light of Matthew's intention, it becomes clear that he's not distorting the meaning of Micah 5:2. Instead, he emphasizes that the implications in the line has divine purposes. And additionally, it's possible that Herod's Bible expert were quoted from multiple Old Testament passages, contributing to our wording variations that we observe. And Matthew, he reinterprets this to highlight that Bethlehem is not least, but it's not the least. It has divine purpose. So, this is a lot of information. This is very technical, and I just now at the end want to take some minutes and simplify this. We all like things simplified for us. Academics like to complicate things. Communicators like to simplify things. So I will now take the time and just simplify this for you. So consider the classic novel like Moby Dick. Moby Dick, it was written by Herman Melville, and it has the opening sentence which famously read, "Call me Ishmael." Call me Ishmael. This sentence sets the tone for the entire novel and introduces the protagonist. It establishes a sense of identity and at the same time anonymity. Now, Imagine that a contemporary author decides to write a new novel which is inspired by Moby Dick. And now he has the opening sentence. Moby Dick's opening sentence was "Call me Ishmael," but this contemporary new novel which is inspired by Moby Dick has "Don't call me Ishmael." Don't call me Ishmael. Here, the author has taken the famous line, but he has altered it, injecting a sense of defiance and independence from it. So, while the original sentence established the character's willingness to be identified as Ishmael, now the reinterpretation creates a character who rejects that identity, signaling a different theme in the novel. In this modern interpretation, the author hasn't distorted the original sentence, but he has instead emphasized an alternative implication. This is, my friend, exactly what Matthew is doing. It's a creative way to build. He has the legacy of the old work, the classical work, but he's building upon it and he's introducing fresh perspectives. So, my friend, much like this modern reinterpretation, Matthew approaches Micah 5.2 in the Bible and sought to emphasize certain implications and nuances within the text while at the same time staying true to its broader meaning. It is a valuable illustration how literature and including religious texts can evolve and adapt new contexts while preserving the core meaning, and this is exactly what Matthew is doing. So instead of just looking at it while he do something more and new with Micah 2, just read this into what Matthew is trying to do theological wise, Christology wise, and just soak in it while you are pondering about Christ and his birth and how it relates to God's old promises to King David. I see you soon. Just beware of look at Udemy also, where I will soon be putting out more in-depth course material, which I bet you will like. If you like this, you are going to love that, which is even more in-depth. Now, blessings, take care, and I see you later in some more videos where I try to just break through and explain some difficulties in the Gospel of Matthew.